Hello and welcome to the channel of English Rumi. In this clip, we discuss the matter of polygamy in Islam. What do you think about polygamy in Islam? Is it a divine right or a human wrong? Is it a social necessity or a moral problem? In this video, I will explore these questions and more by examining one of the most controversial verses of the Quran that allows polygamy. By the way, this is the second independent episode in the series of controversial verses of Quran. If you want to watch the first episode, please click up here. Polygamy in Islam is permitted by the third verse of Surah An-Nisa, where the Quran authorizes polygamy under certain conditions. If you fear that you might not treat the orphans justly, then marry the women that seem good to you, 2 or 3 or 4. If you fear that you will not be able to treat them justly, then marry 1, or marry from among those who are under your control. Ethically, there are 2 issues with this verse. One is polygamy. The other is that the Quran also legitimizes marrying women who are under men's control without any limitation. To justly analyze this verse, I will examine the historical context and the linguistic analysis of this verse and present both the arguments of the critics and the apologists of polygamy in Islam. The verse of the Quran that allows polygamy was revealed to Muslims at a time when the Muslim community was facing wars and conflicts with the pagan tribes of Arabia. Many Muslim men were killed in these battles, leaving behind widows and orphans who had no means of support or protection. The verse begins by addressing the issue of orphans and their rights, and then allows men to marry more than 1 woman, up to 4, if they fear that they cannot deal justly with the orphans. The verse also states that if men fear that they cannot be equitable to their wives, then they should marry only 1 or resort to their slave women. Some apologists of polygamy argue that this verse was revealed out of compassion and mercy for the widows and orphans who were suffering in the harsh, exceptional conditions of Arabia at the time. Their claim sounds more acceptable if we also take the previous verse into account, where the Quran advises against offending the property of orphans. Give the orphans their property, and do not replace their good ones with your bad ones, and do not eat up their property by mingling it with your own property, for that is indeed a great sin. The apologists claim that polygamy was a social welfare measure that ensured the protection and provision of these vulnerable groups, and that it was not meant to satisfy the sexual desires of men. They also point out that polygamy was not a new or unique phenomenon in Arabia, but rather a common practice among many cultures and regions before and after Islam. They cite examples from the Bible, such as Abraham, Jacob, David, and Solomon, who had multiple wives and concubines. However, some critics of polygamy challenge this argument by saying that the historical context of the verse does not justify its universal application in all times and places. They contend that polygamy was a temporary solution for a specific problem that no longer exists in most modern societies. They assert that polygamy is not compatible with the values of justice, equality, dignity, and human rights that Islam promotes. They also question the validity of comparing Islam with other religions or cultures that have different sources of authority and guidance. This argument works well against the fundamentalist Islamists who view polygamy as a divine right and an all-time social necessity. To support their arguments, they use more examples and evidence to illustrate and demonstrate the benefits or harms of polygamy in different Muslim societies. For example, they say, according to a study by Al-Qarnawi, polygamy has been linked to higher rates of domestic violence, divorce, and child abuse in some Muslim countries. The study found that the women in polygamous marriages reported more psychological distress, marital dissatisfaction, family dysfunction, and suicidal ideation than women in monogamous marriages. The verse of the Quran that allows polygamy uses some words and expressions that have been subject to different interpretations and translations by scholars and commentators. The phrase that was repeated twice in this verse is in khiftum, meaning if you fear or doubt. The if phrases clearly imply conditions or limitations for polygamy, meaning that men should only marry more than one woman if they fear injustice towards orphans. Therefore, if there are no orphans in the first place, then the whole permission for polygamy is nullified. Moreover, if they fear inequality among wives, they should refrain from marrying more than one woman, even if they have orphans to raise. However, most Islamic clerics ignored or overlooked one or both of these conditions, and they allowed polygamy for Muslim men without any restrictions. Some clerics only required the consent of the first wife or previous wives for the subsequent marriages. What makes this verse more problematic and debatable is that some Islamic clerics interpret the word yatama as female orphans, and as the whole chapter is about an-nisa, meaning women or wives, they authorize marriage with female orphans who can sometimes have low ages. For one thing, As-Sa'di in his interpretation of this verse says, "And if you fear that you will not justly treat the orphan women who are under your care and guardianship, and you fear that you will not fulfill their rights because you do not love them, then treat others justly and marry whatever women please you." The phrase "ma malakat aymanukum" literally means what your right hands possess, and refers to slave women who were captured or bought by men. So that's why I personally prefer to translate this expression to the ones under your control. Some interpreters suggest that this phrase offers an alternative to polygamy, meaning that men should marry slave women instead of free women if they cannot afford or handle more than one wife. However, other interpreters propose that this phrase complements polygamy, meaning that men can marry slave women in addition to free women without any limit or restriction. The dogmatic Islamists argue that the linguistic analysis of the verse supports the view that polygamy is a lawful and beneficial practice in Islam. They claim that the verse gives men the freedom and flexibility to choose their wives according to their needs and preferences, as long as they're just and fair to them. They also claim that the verse allows men to marry slave women as a way of liberating and honoring them, and that this does not affect the rights or status of their free wives. The critics of polygamy challenge this argument by saying that the linguistic analysis of the verse reveals its ambiguity and complexity, and that it does not provide a clear or definitive ruling on polygamy. They contend that the verse leaves room for different interpretations and applications. In addition, the critics of polygamy use more counter-arguments and refutations to challenge the arguments of the dogmatic Islamists who support polygamy in Islam. For example, they say the dogmatic Islamists' argument that polygamy is a way of liberating and honoring slave women is based on a false dilemma, as it assumes that there are only two options for slave women, either to be married or to be mistreated. However, there is a third option, which is to free them and grant them their rights and dignity as human beings. The dogmatic Islamists' argument that polygamy gives men the freedom and flexibility to choose their wives according to their needs and preferences is based on a double standard, as it ignores the needs and preferences of women who may not want to share their husbands with other women. Moreover, it contradicts the principle of consent and mutual agreement in marriage, as it allows men to impose their will on their wives without consulting them or respecting their feelings. The dogmatic Islamists claim that justice and equity are possible and attainable, and that the wives have the same rights and duties as in monogamy. critics of polygamy argue that justice and equity are impossible and unrealistic, and that the wives suffer from discrimination, oppression, humiliation, isolation, and competition. However, we may also wonder if polygamy is ever justified or acceptable in today's world standards. Some may argue that polygamy is only allowed in warlike conditions where so many men get killed, leaving behind many widows and orphans who need protection and provision. In this case, polygamy can be seen as an innovation or a reform that responds to a specific situation. However, others may argue that polygamy may be used only for the purpose of widening options for men to marry different women with no limitation, regardless of the consequences for the women, the children, and the society. In this case, polygamy may be seen as an injustice or an oppression that violates the rights and dignity of human beings. In the end of the clip, I'll also read you a beautiful quote from Qur'an that indirectly but strongly nullifies polygamy. What do you think of this issue? Do you agree or disagree with any of these views? Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I appreciate your feedback and engagement. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new from it, please click that thumbs up button and support me to make more videos for you. This will also help YouTube to recommend more similar videos to you. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. God has not placed two hearts inside any man.